So how do dismissive avoidants show up in long-term relationships and marriages? A lot of the content out there, including my own, is centered around the shorter-term relationships, where they usually tend to leave between 4 to 8 months. But in some instances, they make it to longer-term committed relationships and even marriages. So how do they show up in this? It tends to follow a very predictable pattern, a pattern that results in a very lonely relationship, a very lonely marriage for the person that's married to them. Now keep in mind, dismissive avoidants are people that experienced consistent emotional neglect in childhood. Their basic needs were met, their emotional needs were not. Often growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings, their own feelings were discouraged, rejected. They weren't safe to express their emotions without rejection. They often had a parent or parents that had very high expectations on them that they struggled to meet, which causes them to feel like they can't meet expectations. And they were often parentified at a young age, meaning thrust into an adult-like role far earlier than they're ready how. And they never had guidance on how to handle emotions, how to cope with stress, and they weren't given that love. And they personalized that lack of love growing up to feel defective, which is a wound of shame. And that defectiveness wound drives the entire attachment style and causes them to feel very unsafe with emotional closeness, because they fear that if they let their partner in, let them into their heart, and let down their walls, their partner's gonna figure them out and figure out that they're defective and not lovable and reject them. So, in the longer term committed relationships and marriages, as the relationship progresses, each advancing step of commitment, the dismissive avoidant withdraws more and more and more emotionally and physically from the relationship. Yes, they're still in the relationship, they're still present, but they're not really there. Now, once it reaches a marriage standpoint, once it reaches that commitment level, or especially when there's kids that are now born, if that's the kind of relationship it is, it's become so real, so committed that they completely detach emotionally from the relationship. Yes, on paper, they're still there, they're still married, they're still living in the same house, but they're essentially a roommate at this point because they've completely emotionally detached, and physical intimacy is non-existent at this point too. Keep in mind, when you commit to somebody, especially at a deep level like marriage, it is implied that you have to be vulnerable with this person, that you have to lower your walls and you have to let this person in. And since lowering walls and being vulnerable equates to rejection in the mind of a dismissive avoidant, it is also associated with commitment. So commitment equals rejection. So this is a person that gets triggered, and to soothe themselves, they create emotional distance to feel safe again. So as the relationship advances, they retreat more and more and more and more. Physical intimacy, well, guess what? It boosts oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. Human beings are naturally bonding creatures. We bond to one another. We bond to pets, we bond to children, and we bond to partners. Well, oxytocin, that bonding hormone produced during physical intimacy, boosts emotional intimacy. And emotional intimacy is unsafe, so they withdraw from physical intimacy as well. And this is a person that does not handle criticism well. Any kind of feedback, they take it as an attack, confirmation of their own defectiveness. They tend to shut down, get quiet, and conflicts go unresolved. They fear conflict because they couldn't express themselves as a kid. They got rejected. So every time there's conflict, they tend to stonewall, get very defensive, shut down, and they never circle back to it. It always goes unresolved, leading to resentment on both sides. And the relationship really just is roommate status. It's completely lonely. You can be married to someone, but really be completely lonely at the same time because your feelings, your emotional needs are not being met. No matter how hard you push, this person is not participating. Now keep in mind, they don't have the capacity to even understand their own emotions much of the time. So processing your emotions, your needs is overwhelming to them. They were never shown how to do it. This is why your boundaries are so important. Your boundaries are your limits of what you want, don't want, what you need, don't need, what you'll tolerate, what you won't tolerate, and what your expectations of your partner are, or your spouse. And let your partner, let your dismissive avoidant partner in a long-term relationship know what your needs are. And if they're not willing to address that, if they're not willing to respect your boundaries, you might have to reevaluate the relationship, because does it really work for you? And only you can determine that. But you can't force someone to change. You can't force someone to work on themselves. You can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. And if they don't want to participate emotionally or physically when it comes to physical intimacy in the relationship, you can't force them to. All you can do is take ownership of your side of the street and do the secure thing of holding boundaries and making sure that you're showing up for yourself. But don't personalize it. The lack of intimacy in any regard, it really isn't because of you not being enough for them. It's because this is a person that is triggered by closeness, doesn't feel safe being vulnerable, doesn't understand their own emotions, and really feels unsafe with emotional intimacy. And that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their insecurities, their attachment wounds, and yes, their choices, because they are a grown adult who is capable of making their own choices, including the choice to self-reflect and heal.